Hey everybody, welcome to the Buffalo Plus YouTube channel on location in Las Vegas. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Mike Catalana along with Dan Fetes. The stage is behind us, ready for Thursday. Before we get to the football, Dan, I've been to Las Vegas before.
You have.
You got your first sense of Vegas. So what was your initial impression?
There are a lot of casinos, and I'm looking forward to placing a wager and gambling for my first time in my life.
And
I'm looking forward to it.
if you find out at some point all these casinos close, it's because Dan took them for everything they had.
Bankruptcy, that's the goal. Bankrupting these casinos, that's it.
A lot of people here.
Yes.
This is different. It's more like Nashville. See what I mean? A lot of people here. It's more like Nashville, where there's always a party going on, but even bigger in Las Vegas. There's always events going on. But we've already seen Bills fans here. There'll be fans of teams from all over the league. It's really become just a league-wide celebration. And then, by the way, they do the draft at the same time.
Well, it just seemed like the entire NFL was in Indianapolis for the Combine, and now it seems like all of the NFL and the fans are coming right here to Las Vegas. Like, the city already has conventions going on 24/7, but this is just another level. The stage here, they're going to be setting up fountains for the red carpet, the Bellagio. It's got a little bit of everything, and like you said, Mike, Nashville's a party. Cleveland kind of got rained on, but it's Cleveland.
Yeah.
This is Vegas, and they're doing it Vegas style.
Yeah, you see a lot of sights out here.
People watching is great.
Yeah, sometimes not so great. Okay, now let's talk a little football. What's the goal here for Brandon Beane? Not only to get a really good player, but also to
Re-sign them.
Yeah.
It's to draft, develop, re-sign. That is what Brandon Beane's MO has been ever since he got to Buffalo. And they did it today, picking up Ed Oliver's fifth-year option. Mike, he has now picked up every single fifth-year option on players that Brandon Beane has drafted in the first round.
Yeah, and that's no given because teams do that, where they'll just let the player walk after the fourth year. Fans understand this. A first-round draft pick, there's that fifth-year option for the team, which also goes into the calculations of teams making picks in the first round because that
Certain
option,
position, yeah.
certain positions is a real benefit. A lot of times they believe quarterback is that way,
Yep.
but in other positions maybe not so much. But the idea is look at the guys. I think of the group, obviously, Trey White before Beane got to the Bills. Josh Allen, an obvious one. They picked up Tremaine Edmonds. That's going to be interesting at the end of the year. But no number one pick for the 1 year when they traded for Diggs. But that 2019 pick of Ed Oliver, picking that up, I think Ed Oliver, in my opinion, is the next guy maybe to get the long-term deal.
And it's probably over Tremaine Edmonds. Like, just from his play, his impact, the upside that Ed Oliver brings, Mike, I still think is higher than what Tremaine Edmonds can bring. And I know this isn't a Tremaine Edmonds conversation to have right now, but it's the fact of what the flashes that you saw once again in 2021, that what Ed Oliver could be that disruptive guy that they drafted 9th overall.
It's an interesting dynamic when you pick up the option, or in some cases don't, because the player then, in the case of Edmonds, does become a free agent at the end of the year if he gets to that point. Now look, if Tremaine Edmonds is all that potential wrapped up with all that ability, then maybe he ends up getting a deal with the Bills. That could happen. I think Ed Oliver has shown them to not just pick up the option, but I do believe that's going to be that conversation.
They want him long-term, I think, is what you're saying. Yeah, I think they see him as a long-term plan, as a fixture on that defensive line. I totally agree with you. And like I said, and I think that as they head into this draft, and we'll break down more coming up on the Buffalo Plus YouTube channel over the next 48 hours and all of that, I think that that's another thing that they're looking at is to, Ed Oliver, they needed a hole there. They needed to fill a hole there, the defensive line.
Yeah.
There are holes. We talked about it. We talked about them on the podcast. Cornerback, wide receiver, all those things. But Brandon Beane was really aggressive in free agency, and I think that's something to note, that he doesn't want to come in with glaring holes into this draft class. So I think that's something to note. What's different than a Josh Allen draft, an Ed Oliver draft, that there isn't as big of a hole, I think, as some people assume.
Yeah, we could go back to when the Bills were picking, say, when they got Josh Allen. The idea is they could pick almost any position because they needed everyone. It's a little different now. I believe corner is a position of need at some point. I think at some point they're going to want a safety, whether it's to replace Jordan Poyer at some point or just for depth. Wide receiver is always somewhat of a need, but it's not a desperation need for this team.
I don't think any of these are desperation needs. And I know some people are probably screaming, what do you mean? We need a cornerback. You need a cornerback. Brandon Beane even said it, like, while 99% of their focus is on the draft and picking players, a guy that's going to come across that stage, there is still veterans to sign out there. And like I said, they signed Kissenberry not that long ago, a few days ago. So they're still adding players to build this 90-man roster to go to training camp.
Keep your eyes on what other teams do.
Yep.
The teams that are picking a number one corner in the first round, right? Stingley going early and Sauce Gardner, those kind of guys going. Those type of teams could also be looking to drop a veteran because that guy's going to step right in as the number one guy, or at least it bounces a guy down their list a little bit.
And I don't want to be the Mr. Sarcasm because I know I have a tendency to do that on here, but we're going to hear a lot about every team wanting to trade up, every team wanting to trade back, and every team saying they're pretty comfortable with picking where they are. So a lot of smoke screens. I know a lot of people are saying, there's a lot of smoke going around about Breece Hall. Be careful what you're hearing right now. There's a reason of what you're hearing, especially around this time.
I think what we know in reality is Brandon Beane has guys he wants to pick in the first round.
Yep.
The only problem you could run into is if you run out of first round picks and you can't get out of the first round. I still believe at 25, there's going to be teams trying to jump back in to take a quarterback. I do believe there's going to be a competition there amongst teams who want to trade out. I'm not saying the Bills are doing it, but if they're in that position, there's going to be teams dropping back in to get a Matt Corral or to get Ritter, one of those quarterbacks late in the first round, and they'll have that opportunity. That's where you can get yourself caught. You're sitting there going, do we really want this guy? Now, they get a really good player at 25, but it may not be at the value.
And that's the thing is, like you talked about with Sauce Gardner and Derek Stingley, like once some of these top corners go, there is a little bit of a drop-off. And when you start to see some of those guys go, that's when you're going to start seeing the phone calls. If you start to see 3 wide receivers go in a row, early in the, in the early teens, I think a lot of people are going to start making moves. So it's going to go back and forth. That's the chess match game that Brandon Beane says. He admits he's not great at being patient. Again, I made that sarcastic comment about every team wanting to trade up or trade back. I still think Beane moves up. I think he moves up and gets a talented player. Look, you and me disagree about the Bills. They have depth. I think they need top-end talent, and I think they need to go get it. Pick 15 or above. I think Beane's got to move about 10 spots to get his guy.
Yeah, he could. He could be really aggressive. And look at this, Bills fans. You've seen your GM trade up again in the same draft. We've seen him trade out of it by moving the pick to get Stephon Diggs. We've seen him stay where he wanted and got his guy when he got Ed Oliver. So he's made those moves. He's capable of almost anything, but Dan's right. You can tell. He gets a little twitchy. And McDermott talking about eating candy.
Yeah, it's such...
You think that's not...
No. But he did say he would want a chocolate milkshake. He then was more honest.
But why is he talking... You think he's a candy guy?
Not at all.
If he was a candy guy, what kind of candy?
Junior mints. Right? It's like fresh breath to go with his candy.
Mick Ultra, Junior Mint for Coach.
And an ice cream sundae.
To top it off after the week. All right, we've got complete coverage. Remember our show, 7:30 Thursday night, right here on the Buffalo Plus YouTube channel. Dan and I here, Jenna back at the studio. For Dan Fetes, I'm Mike Catalana. Thanks for watching. And as Jenna always says, make sure to like, comment, subscribe. We'll see you the next time from Las Vegas.